we have participants who are joined from different countries. So we'll just encourage you to please identify yourself by your name and the organization that you represent. In this room, we're privileged to have a diverse assembly of thought leaders, change agents, and visionaries. Today's conversation is not just from this podium here to the audience, but more interactive. But I won't do the job of the next person to come up, who's the corporate affairs director at Coca-Cola HBC, and also the board member of the UN Global Compact Network Nigeria, in the person of Mrs. Oluwaseromidayo George. So I'll call her up now. I'm co-chair and the chair of the UN Global Compact Network Nigeria board. So please, another round of applause for Mrs. Oluwaseromidayo George.
Thank you very much. So it seems as if I have a lot of roles and, in this small body. But as women, we're capable multitasking, and able to do justice to every role in which we serve. So I won't take your time this morning. It's very good to, and I think the empty chairs here, maybe we can come forward. Would you like to come forward so we can feel the... Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests, and board members of the United Nations Global Compact Nigerian Network. I want to welcome you here this morning. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here talking to you about the issues of corporate governance. I'm not a lawyer, but I have very close associates and acquaintances who are lawyers. So I'm very vast in issues of corporate governance. I think it's a very important topic. Corporate governance, good governance. There's a need for us to really ensure that governance is very key and very top of the agenda, whether in corporate organizations or whether in the political sphere in which we operate and in our various communities. So I want to welcome you here this morning to a very important event, to the launch of the Transformational Governance Corporate Toolkit. This toolkit is a very, very key and pivotal resource for reshaping the global landscape in which we all find ourselves today. The global landscape is rapidly evolving, and there's a need for us to continuously ensure that we're dynamically, changing the scope of governance to match the realities of our time. So our collective presence here underscores our shared commitment to shaping a new era of responsible business conduct, transparency, and ethical leadership within this community and within Nigeria. Developed collaboratively with participating companies across the world and partner organizations of the United Nations Global Compact, think tank lab on transformational governance, this toolkit can be instrumental to ethical leadership and responsible business conduct if used. I need to pause here and commend Owando PLC, represented by Mrs. Ayotola Jagun. Ms. Jagun is also a board member of UNGC in Nigeria, and she's been at the forefront of shaping issues of corporate governance, also with Mr. Pampa here as well. So we're meeting for the very first time, but he's very well known to us, and he's been doing tremendous work in this space. So I want to commend you, Ayotola, for the work that you've been doing. It's a legacy wherever you go. It's something that you would leave behind, and something that, will benefit organizations, and countries and communities in Nigeria. So we do hope that we'll be able to do more and support you from behind in terms of the work that you do. So Ayo is also a member of the Anti-Corruption and Governance Working Group, and we also recognize her tireless effort and participation in the think lab at the global stage as well. So she's been doing a lot of work locally and also globally. In today's dynamic world, corporate governance is evolving rapidly, with stakeholders demanding transparency, accountability, and sustainability. Nigeria, with its vibrant private sector and ambitious economic goals, must prioritize strong governance to be able to attract investment, ethical investment, and foster innovation. Recent data points paint a very compelling picture as to the reason why this toolkit is very, very important, and also the issues of corporate governance. In 2020, Nigeria stood at 131 out of 190 countries in terms of the ease of doing business. Not a very good place to be. Also, a 2023 World Bank report highlights the strong governance strong governance is associated with 1.5 increase in GDP per capita in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's something very significant. But challenges remain. The 2023 Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International ranks Nigeria at 147 out of 180 countries, scoring 25 out of 100, indicating a need for significant improvement. So this is a very dark story to tell. So this is where the Transformational Governance Corporate Toolkit then becomes very, very vital, becomes very key and very pivotal to the work that we're doing here today. This comprehensive resource is more than just a guide. It's a catalyst for change. It provides a structured framework for assessing your current governance practices, identifying areas for improvement, and developing strategies to align your businesses with principles of transformational governance. By embracing this toolkit, your company's performance journey can be transformed. The toolkit provides, let me just pull out some key information. It provides performance snapshot. You can assess your company's baseline and identify opportunities to improve your approach with a self-assessment tool, Expert insights. You can increase organizational capacity with business briefs relevant to executive leadership, government relations, legal functions, and investments. Recommendations. You can also take action with curated resources and additional guidance to expand your company's approach to governance. The global shift towards environmental, social, and governance, ESG principles, is no longer a trend. It is an imperative. It has become extremely important. It is a tool that which investors also use to assess the viability of investing in your companies. And as stewards of Nigerian businesses, we must recognize that ESG is not just a buzzword. It is here to stay. I can tell you that much. I am an ESG practitioner. It is a compass for sustainable growth. The journey towards transformational governance requires collaboration. So we therefore encourage everyone online and in this room, and as we take it forward in terms of creating awareness about this tool, we want to hear about your experiences. So we'll be pulling data and getting feedback in terms of, your experiences in interacting with this tool, and engage in open dialogue. And I hope that will start from today. Together, we can build a more ethical, sustainable, and prosperous future for Nigeria and the rest of the world. So, like I said, I won't take too much of your time, very succinct. I want to thank you for your dedication and your commitment. And I wish you a wonderful dialogue session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. George. Just before we go on quickly, we'll just want to acquaint you with the United Nations Global Compact. Some of you here, your organizations might be members of the United Nations Global Compact, and if not, we have a video for you just to introduce you to the United Nations Global Compact. Thank you. So that is just a short presentation on what the UN Global Compact stands for. And just to recognize the individuals leading the local network, which is the Nigerian office of the UN Global Compact. At the board level, we have with us Mrs. Uto Ukpana. She's the company secretary, MTN Nigeria PLC, and board member, and also the co-lead of the Anti-Corruption and Governance Working Group. We also have Ms. Ayotola Jagun, who is the Chief Compliance Officer and Company Secretary, Owando PLC, also a board member and co-thematic lead of the Anti-Corruption Working Group. Right next at the executive level, unfortunately, the executive director in person of Naomi Wokolo is not able to join in person. However, she's committed to this and she'll be joining us online to give the welcome remarks, the keynote remarks, I beg your pardon. So we'll have Naomi on very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much to me, and greetings everyone, esteemed board members of the UN Global Compact Network Nigeria, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's really great to see everyone in the audience. Good morning and welcome to the launch of the Transformational Governance Corporate Toolkit in Nigeria. I would like to take this opportunity to thank every one of you for your presence here today and your unwavering dedication, tireless effort, and conviction in the impact of governance. First, I want to greatly thank Owando PLC for supporting this launch in Nigeria. Owando's role in the UN Global Compact's Think Lab on transformational governance was very crucial in shaping this transformative tool. The world around us is changing rapidly, and the way we govern corporations must change too. Compliance with regulations is no longer enough. Businesses today are expected to operate ethically, act responsibly, and contribute to the long-term sustainability of society. The Transformational Governance Self-Assessment Tool is designed to empower companies to evaluate their current level of transformational governance, identify areas for improvement across their operations, supply chains, and stakeholder engagement, and develop concrete strategies to strengthen their governance practices and drive positive societal change. Mapped against relevant SDG 16 targets, this tool equips companies to transform their governance, not only internally, but also within the communities that they operate in. For us, strong corporate governance in Nigeria is vital for attracting investment and fostering sustainable economic growth. According to the 2023 Sustainable Competitiveness Report, Nigeria ranks 161 in the global governance rankings. While research highlights the importance of strong leadership and robust regulatory frameworks, challenges still remain. These include multiple factors like contributing to governance failure, such as weak enforcement and conflicting regulations, as well as the need for improved implementation of existing governance codes. However, effective corporate governance is not just an option, it's a necessity for achieving the SDGs. We know that strong governance practices can contribute to responsible consumption, climate change, reduced inequality, gender equality, decent work, hunger eradication that is facing the world today, good health, clean energy, and so much more. The issue is also not limited to businesses. For investors, weak institutions, diminished rule of law, and unstable governments pose significant risks. Similarly, effective tax governance is crucial for governments to support strong institutions and governance capability. Currently, many investors focus on ESG and human rights issues in separate spheres. However, a holistic view shows that considering the rule of law, civic space, and strong institution is essential. Investors, particularly those in high-risk sectors and countries, need to integrate transformational governance issues into their portfolio management. Regulations mandating human rights due diligence are raising standards, but due diligence must also consider political and geopolitical risks to support transformational governance. It is important to note that transformational governance is not just about meeting legal requirements. It's also about embracing principles. It's about accountability. It's about ethics. It's about inclusivity and transparency. It challenges companies to look beyond their internal operations and consider their broader impact on society. By aligning with the SDGs, especially SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, Transformational governance empowers businesses to play a crucial role in building a fairer, more peaceful, and prosperous future. As a final note, I would like to remind us that transformational governance is not just an option. Again, it is a roadmap for a more sustainable future. As we embrace transformational governance, we recognize that our actions extend beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Each decision, each policy, and each act of governance should aid in the advancement of the SDGs. Once again, I want to thank us all for being here. I can see Mr. Soji in the audience. I want to recognize you, sir. And I extend my sincere gratitude again to Oando PLC, most especially Ms. Jagun, our board member and co-thematic lead for anti-corruption and governance, for our invaluable contribution to the development of the Transformational Governance Toolkits and for the spirit of partnership in convening today. Thank you, and I wish us all insightful engagement.
Thank you very much, Ms. Umokolo. And now we will be getting to the introduction of transformational governance. Like I said earlier, corporate governance might be more familiar, but we at the UN Global Compact don't use the word corporate governance. We say transformational governance. Joining us from New York this morning, she was going to join us from New York with the time difference, but as of this morning, there was a little development. But however, she'll be sharing. Michelle Breslauer is the Senior Manager for Governance and Peace at the UN Global Compact. I will be doing the introduction to the Transformational Governance Corporate Toolkit. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the event today. I apologize that I can't be there in person and hope that this video gives you a good introduction to the approach of transformational governance and to our recently released Transformational Governance Corporate Toolkit. My name is Michelle Breslauer. I'm with the UN Global Compact as a senior manager on the programs team in New York City. So I wanted to start by giving a little bit of background on transformational governance as a concept and how we got there. Sort of pulling back into the state of the world today, and here we see on the screen the UN Secretary General speaking to the World Economic Forum's 2024 annual meeting in Davos. We see these converging crises, and we see a lack of trust in institutions, both public and private, but with rising expectations and interests in business playing a role, not only in showcasing ethical leadership, but in really working in partnership with government, with civil society and others to build public trust in these institutions and to build partnership. And the Secretary General has called for deep reforms to global governance to manage geopolitical tensions during this new era of multipolarity. He wants to build a new multilateral system. And he says we can't build a future for our grandchildren without with a system built for our grandparents. There are so many crises in the world, but the Secretary General highlighted too, climate and artificial intelligence as areas that are spoken about, that are discussed, but for which we do not yet have an effective global strategy. And it's really these geopolitical divides that are preventing us from coming together around global solutions for global challenges. And so we need to think about how we rebuild trust and what the role of business is in doing that and meeting these rising expectations. And that's how we got to the concept of transformational governance, which really aims to expand that G or governance element in ESG, environmental, social governance. And it takes a much more holistic approach to acknowledge the fact that the challenges that we're facing in society and that business is facing are interrelated. They can't be addressed through one function or one strategy or one policy. And so we look at transformational governance through a number of intersecting dimensions. First, taking traditional conventional governance and really broadening the idea beyond just board and management oversight into policies, strategies, operations, relationships, and values. The second dimension is sustainable governance, acknowledging the fact that companies are now having to manage their social and environmental risks and opportunities. And this includes, for instance, increasing disclosure requirements around environmental and human rights due diligence. And then finally, global governance, the role that companies can and should play in strengthening public institutions, laws, and systems, not as a substitute for government action, but as a complement. And together, these dimensions represent transformational governance and a transformational governance approach. And I think it's noteworthy to acknowledge also that these are areas that may be managed through different functions within a company. And those different functions need to be speaking to each other. And so this why transformational governance really comes about as a framework for businesses to address these rising stakeholder expectations, and acknowledging that traditional corporate governance is quite limited to internal activities, but doesn't really embrace the realities of the external challenges, socioeconomic, political, and environmental risk that do impact ethical leadership and the sustainability agenda. And so this is a new and expanded vision and ambition for governance that aims to have an impact both internally to a company and externally to society. So through transformational governance, we're calling on businesses to embrace a more holistic approach to the G in ESG, one that ensures that they consider wider society in their efforts to strengthen corporate, sustainable, and global governance. And this includes working on such efforts not only within their own businesses, but also working with civil society and government to strengthen institutions, laws, and systems. And transformational governance is grounded in the Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is about promoting peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, providing access to justice for all, and to build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Through a number of years of work, we put forward the SDG 16 business framework, which took this complex, multifaceted goal that's really written for government and translated it for business and by business. We took each one of those elements under the targets of SDG 16 to describe what actions business could take to embed these areas both internally and externally. And that's reflected in the SDG 16 business framework that you see here, which provides a roadmap for transformational governance. After the release of the SDG 16 business framework, which I encourage you all to look through online, we launched a Transformational Governance Think Lab bringing together over 20 companies from 5 different regions around the world, which had 2 work streams. One was to take this concept of transformational governance and to further operationalize it through a series of consultations and through the creation of a corporate toolkit that I'll be presenting to you today. And the second work stream was on engaging chief legal officers. So really looking at this new enhanced role of the legal function in the ESG and sustainability sphere. And to try to move that function from being what's traditionally thought of as a no function into one that is really providing those elements of SDG 16 and that advisory role within companies. And looking at the first work stream and the outputs of that, we launched recently the Transformational Governance Corporate Toolkit. This is publicly available, easily accessible online, and the link will be shared with all of you today. And the aim is really to empower companies to educate their employees and colleagues and to inspire transformational governance throughout their organizations. And this toolkit includes 3 different elements: a self-assessment tool, key messages for frequently asked questions, and 3 different issue briefs. So I'd like to show you a little bit more about the self-assessment tool, because this is really a framework for companies to engage with and apply the principles of transformational governance. It's separated into both internal actions and external actions. And you'll remember that that for us is really core to the approach of transformational governance. And it takes the user through an anonymous journey through these questions that you see here on the screen. 16 different elements representing these dimensions around transformational governance, from ethical leadership to the incorporation of ESG into governance and decision-making, to peace, rule of law, stakeholder engagement, and community relations. And so as you proceed through this toolkit, you're asked a series of yes or no questions that allow you to really learn more about how to move forward, not only with these conversations about transformational governance, to bring questions to your colleagues or leadership, but to also access resources to see other areas and examples of work in these spaces that you see here on the screen. And as you're moving through the tool, this is the type of question that you'll see about, for instance, does your business embrace ethical leadership principles? And then there are a number of different answers at the bottom that will lead to an application of where you are, an assessment of where you are in your transformational governance journey. Are you at the beginning, middle, or advanced? And when you see where you are in that journey, you also are able to access resources relating to each one of these internal actions and external actions, and to see your progress across the targets of SDG 16. So in that way, we went from taking this very complex goal of SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and saying, now this goal is critical for an operating environment for businesses and society to thrive. But it's complex for businesses to think through how to embed peace, justice, and strong institutions in their own internal operations, as well as what that means for their external operations. And so through this translation that we've done of transformational governance, we're able to actually do that translation, but then also do a mapping to SDG 16 so that we can make the linkages between these different elements and supporting peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. There are also frequently asked questions available in the toolkit. So here you see, for instance, one example: how can this tool help my company? And it really helps companies evaluate and evolve their governance. It provides a structured framework to assess a company's current state of governance across operations, suppliers, stakeholders, and to really look at that against the principles of transformational governance and SDG 16 targets. It helps you get a head start on risk mitigation and long-term viability, to strategically align with global frameworks, and to earn stakeholders' trust and improve social sustainability. We've also taken transformational governance and tried to contextualize it in the current conversations that are happening globally. And so we have these 3 briefs available in the Corporate Toolkit. One is to think about the role of the corporate board and executive leadership in taking a transformational governance approach. The second is, what does this mean for responsible governmental engagement in a time where businesses are acting both through lobbying, through policy advocacy, but also through wider influence and collective action? How do we think about being accountable, ethical, inclusive, and transparent across your responsible governmental engagement? And then the final brief is on investing in transformational governance, how investors are thinking about supporting that operating environment through supporting both human rights and governance and tax responsibilities that are key to upholding peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. And so I invite you to explore this toolkit. I hope that these broad themes that we've talked about today will help set the stage for your discussions to come, and will help give you some guiding framework on where to really contextualize the elements of transformational governance, not only for your own company, but within your own communities. Please explore, please be in touch with us with further questions. Thank you.
That was Michelle, the senior manager for governance and peace from the UN Global Compact, giving an introduction to the toolkit. Right next on the agenda, very quickly, we'll be having Ms. Ayatollah Jagun, who was part of the development of this toolkit that spanned over a period of about 18 to 24 months. But just before that, we have another presentation that talks about, from the point of view, the different participants that engage in the development of the toolkit, as well as the Think Lab on the transformational governance. So right after that, we'll have Ms. Jagu come up talking on expanding from corporate governance to transformational governance. Thank you.
The Think Lab on transformational governance was established to bring together companies from geographies around the world, thinking about what's at the forefront for the role of business and society. Transformational governance is underpinned by the Sustainable Development Goal of Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, SDG 16. We take those tenets and we're translating them for business action and asking businesses to think about how they can embed that within their internal and external behavior and activities.
There's a rising tide of expectation on companies as it relates to environmental, social, and governance criteria.
Geopolitics are in essence affecting everything: consumers, society, and the way in which companies have to have a license to operate.
What are the leaders of our company prioritizing? Tone at the top, transforming the way that we do business at the very highest levels.
You are now actually having to think about not only where you are headquartered, but where your supply chain is located, how your consumers are thinking about how your products are being manufactured, forcing business leaders to really think about how you interacting with your employees and how you blend to your corporate values when it comes to climate change. There's a lot of pressure on us as a business to transition very quickly to cleaner forms of energy.
We have to understand understand that the world has changed and that we need to not just change with it, but really be at the forefront of implementing that change and demonstrating that change.
And so what we're trying to do is take the challenges and turn them into opportunities.
And so here's where the UN Global Compact really comes into play.
An initiative like transformational governance that focuses on transparency, that focuses on accountability, that focuses on ethical conduct is key to being able to realize all the SDG goals.
We're also working now with the legal function as champions of transformational governance.
Laws create foundation, and governance is so critical to being able to implement some of the outcomes and the way driving towards.
Every part of an organization, it needs to have its own governance structure so that they can act on the strategies that they put.
Sharing best practice, showing what good looks like, creating new networks where we're all improving one another's performance.
So it is really incumbent on us to understand what best practice looks like and how we can raise that bar higher.
We don't want to look back and say, you know, we had the opportunity to help change the world as we're changing our business. But that's going to require an all hands on deck sort of approach.
SDG 16 talks about justice. We are in a time where we have gone from crisis to crisis to crisis. Finding that strategy and sticking to it is something we need to get back to.
In collaboration with government, holding government accountable.
Global goals depend on every sector playing their part.
The role for lawyers is to say, this is how you create a relationship and a partnership for something that's good. Their role is to say, yeah, that's really helpful in legal terms, and we can see how that would then contribute to observance of rule of law in the country.
The 2030 agenda, of which SDG 16 is a component, is not just for governments. It's actually for everyone.
And so what can be truly transformational here is for businesses to take on these principles of accountability, of ethics, of inclusivity and transparency, both internally, but to support that in the communities and societies that they operate in, so that we can begin to rebuild trust in these institutions of governance and to fulfill our social contract.
Thank you very much, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Like Michelle said, this journey started, I think, in 2016. The launch of the SDG goals. There was an action platform on peace, justice, and strong institutions, where we were trying to look at peace, justice, and strong institutions as a goal. What does it mean, and what does it mean for us as companies, and how can we translate that without stepping on the toes of government and national sovereignty? And the result, 9 years later, or I should say 8 years later, is this toolkit. And it's the first in a stage of so many other things. So what I want to talk about is just maybe give examples, because you've heard repeated from what Naomi said, from what Michelle said, what transformational governance is about. And I hope that some of you have also been able to go and try out the toolkits yourself. And, you know, I don't know how many people have been able to try out the toolkit. Anybody here done the self-assessment? But it's accessible. It is, and the link is in the invite. And you can go and, as a company, try out that toolkit. And so I want to talk about traditional corporate governance and the fact that a lot of us in Nigeria are not even doing corporate governance. We've moved beyond corporate governance to transformational governance. If we think about what happened during COVID, companies had to come together to basically help support government. We think about what we're going through now and the economic advisory team that has been set up by the president because of the challenges of food insecurity, of food security in the country. You have businesses again helping government. We think about what happened in the Russian-Ukraine war and how Air Peace had to go and literally help airlift Nigerians who were stranded in the Ukraine. And so it is not enough for you as a company to say, our role is to make a profit for our shareholders. We've moved beyond that to stakeholder theory, of course, and where we're saying, okay, we understand that we have a range of stakeholders, but we are being increasingly called upon as business to play a role when it comes to the governance of our country. So beyond just doing business. You know, one of the things I'd always used to say, and people joke about it, but I'm very serious, that CEOs in Nigeria are severely underpaid. Because compared to a CEO in the Western world, you have to get involved with the National Assembly. You have to get involved when it comes to the executive. You have to get involved in policy. The reason why we have the NESG is because there is a realization as a think tank that you have to come alongside the legislature to help shape whatever it is that comes out as our laws, so that it creates that enabling environment for businesses to be able to thrive, to create jobs for our people, and for us to just be able to grow as a nation. You know, recently Ola and Plow, decided that they were not going to be buying certain grains. Why? Because it was putting so much pressure on the ability of the common man to be able to feed. We saw at least a bit of relief in that sense. And so businesses are again being called upon to think more transformationally about how we change our environment. I have a presentation, if we can just. So I'm just going to give some examples rather than just go over. This is what happens when you don't share materials, so you know that somebody has covered. So we're looking at how do we move from corporate governance to transformational governance. Next slide, please. And the next. So corporate governance, like we said, is primarily linked to corporate law. It's been expanded. We have the Code of Conduct, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, various codes, the CBN code, to include ethical and societal considerations as well. But they're voluntary mainly, and they although they're embedded in law, a lot of that aspect in terms of sustainability and sustainable development is still voluntary. So, but transformational governance is not a new legal concept. It's more principles based, and it's about taking that principles based approach, expanding the G, like it's been talked about, beyond conventional corporate issues to societal issues of human rights and political engagement. And it's been very difficult for companies to actually look at these issues because nobody wants to pitch themselves against the government in making noise about human rights abuses, taking positions, because these are the same, in a highly regulated environment like it is in Nigeria, you're still going to go to government to get your license to operate. You're still going to go. So these are the conflicts, right? These are the challenges. And so many times, what companies do is they form collaborations, and this is where collective action comes in, where you have, like, for instance, in the oil and gas industry, we have OPTS, which is the Oil Producers Trade Section of the Chamber of Commerce. And we can hide under the umbrella of this industry body to begin to make statements and to begin to put forward positions rather than single yourself out to be targeted next time you go for a license. But overall, we just need to create the right environment. We've seen in our industry a lot of sabotage, oil theft in the Niger Delta. We've seen production become so low compared to previous years. And it's put so much pressure. I mean, we're not selling, the main thing we have to sell in Nigeria is our crude oil. If a lot of it is being stolen and we're not able to get it to market, the revenues for the government reduce. And of course, we don't have those reserves. It puts pressure on the Naira, further pressure on the Naira. And then we are where we are today with the devaluation of the currency because we don't have that production to buffer the consumption that is taking place. And so you then realize how important it is for businesses to be able to come together and strategize and say, how do we deal with this problem in the Niger Delta? It's not enough to just leave it to government, to leave it to the joint task forces, because it's not working. How do we come together and make sure that this works? This is transformational governance. Okay. So we then, so the next thing is corporate governance has been defined in different ways by different scholars. Many seem to agree that it includes a system by which corporations and those who run it are held accountable to their key stakeholders. With transformational governance, you're looking beyond your key stakeholders, whether it's your bankers, your lenders, your communities, and it's wider society. In fact, it's now carrying Nigeria on your conscience, carrying Nigeria in your framework. Because look, this country cannot, it just cannot fall. Because if it does, then there's no business. Of course, you have the gray economy that thrives where there's chaos, and the black economy that thrives where there's chaos and there's war. And people will benefit, but not necessarily in a good way, right? So it behoves on all of us in a world, and it's not just Nigeria, in a world that is increasingly fragile, to take our place in ensuring that we turn things around, whether the fragility is coming as a result of climate change, or that fragility is coming as a result of wars or poverty or scarcity in terms of water. It behoves on companies to take their place and try and change things. One of the things I also realize is that the next generation, the Gen Zs, they're not waiting another 4 or 5 years for the government to change, right? They are, and this is why you have the rise in activism. They're coming to companies because they know that corporates have more power to get things done. So they will come to you and they will, I mean, the reason why we have a lot of environmental activism targeted against companies, or companies are being challenged, whether it's your BP, it's your Boeing, it's your Shell, it's because they realize that companies are able to effect change much quicker than waiting for the electoral process to come about again in another 4 years' time, and for you to have a vote that may not even count, right? So there's an increasing pressure also on companies to move to this stage of transformational governance, rightly or wrongly. Now, key principles of corporate governance include fairness, accountability, responsibility, transparency, and independence. But transformational governance really stems from that SDG 16 business framework, which was launched by the United Global Compact in June 2021. And it draws on all the work that has been done regarding anti-corruption on the 10th principle and integrity. So what are some of the ways in which businesses can internally enhance SDG 16, and how can they externally enhance SDG 16? This information is there in one of the briefs. So please read the briefs. We didn't print it out because we're trying to be conscious of our environment. Internally, it's about ethical leadership, because it's always the tone from the top, right? If that change doesn't happen, if that commitment to change is not there from the top, then nothing happens. It's also incorporating ESG into governance and decision making. This is where ESG is so important. I'm baffled that we have an energy transition plan in Nigeria, and yet when I talk to some business leaders, certainly when I talk to government leaders, they don't seem to understand the importance of operationalizing that energy transition plan. There's now a bit of renewed interest post COP28, and the fact that governments are now beginning to see that companies can profit. They're beginning to see the opportunities that are coming in. I mean, Ghana, I think it was over 850 million they were able to get and sign at COP28 as carbon credits. You know, we are much bigger than Ghana. We have gas as a just transition fuel. There's so much that can happen in that space. But we need to begin to actually see it as something we must do. The status quo has made money for a lot of people, and it's easy to kind of just continue because of vested selfish interests. But we need to get to a point where we incorporate the E, environment, the social, and the governance into our decision-making as companies. Effective grievance mechanisms and access to remedy. We talked about education and training. This is where Owando Foundation and so many other MTN Foundation as well come in, where we invest in primary school education, because it's garbage in, garbage out. If we don't get the standard right from primary school, then what goes into our secondary schools and gets into our universities is not fit for work. And increasingly, one of the things we've done is we have the Change Our World, which is our concept, which is, it's more than a concept, our Change Our World campaign and initiative, where we are introducing climate change issues to kids in our adopted schools. And they are also seeing how they can make money from just picking up plastic waste. And that money goes back into the school. So they can see that it's not enough to just litter. There is value even in this plastic waste. Protecting vulnerable workers and communities, you can understand, is very, very important, especially at times like this. Prevention of corruption, integrating ESG into your own decision-making, taking responsibility from a climate change perspective with your scope 3 emissions, science-based targets, making sure that you are following through with your third parties, your suppliers and contractors, human rights due diligence, reporting and disclosure. And then from externally, here we have peace. I mean, what is peace? If you don't have a peaceful society, you can't do business, right? Responsible taxation practices. I know Mr. Soji Apampa, we worked on something with the last ICPC or chair or CEO, right, on responsible taxation practices when it comes to illicit financial flows. Then we have the rule of law, stakeholder engagement, and the list is long. Advocacy and influence, including responsible lobbying, and that's a lot of the work that the NESG does. And then collective action and partnerships with civil society. We have work that we're doing with the FRC, and we'll be launching an SME guidelines, corporate governance guidelines for the SME sector 9th of April. Which was done in collaboration with the Financial Reporting Council, CBI, the United Nations Global Compact, and with support from the MacArthur Foundation, because we understand that we also have that responsibility, talking about integrating governance into relationships with third-party suppliers. The supply chain has to be robust enough, and we have to be right now influencing the SMEs to do business ethically and in the principles-based way. And then supporting government, monitoring and reporting things like NATC, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Let's just go very quickly to the next slide. So this again is telling you where you can access this toolkit. The presentations will be made available to you. Please do the assessment. It's a really good self-assessment because it shows you areas where you are doing work as a company and where you need to kind of like maybe consider beefing up. And then in the intermediate, once you understand the importance of transformational governance, you can look at, again, broadening it, and you've got the advanced stage. And so you can locate your company in terms of where it is. Next slide, please. Okay, so the conclusion, the journey towards transformational governance, it's continuous, it's ongoing. Both corporate and transformational governance play crucial roles. Corporate governance actually, it's subsumed within transformational governance. And businesses can advance SDG 16 internally as well as externally, as we've spoken about, and we've given some examples of what companies are already doing in that space. Yeah, and that's it. I think the last slide. Thank you.
Okay, so if you have any questions, we're definitely at that point.
Hold on.
So would appreciate that you introduce yourself, the organization that you represent, and then straight to the point with the questions. We want to manage our time very quickly. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And thanks, Madam, for the excellent presentation. Actually, I'm Dr. David Isiawe. I'm the current Chief Compliance Officer of EcoBank, but also double hat as President of the Information Security Society of Africa in Nigeria. Yeah, by the way, I'm a governance student. That's what I call myself. Looking at all that I've heard, from the beginning up until your presentation, as a matter of fact, when we started, I wrote down and made a note that it would seem to me that the public sector side of things, is not being engaged half as much as the private sector on transformational governance. And if you look at what's happening in the economy today, for instance, right? Big companies, international companies declaring losses, not because of lack of governance, not because of inefficient processes, but primarily due to the external factors, the macroeconomic environment typically determined by the public sector, the government. So the question is there a plan to also engage the government, forcefully, intensely on transformational governance? We would like to know what those kinds of plans are. Thank you.
Take a few questions and then.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Soji Apampa from the Convention on Business Integrity. Mine is to flip what he said. Rather than expecting us to put a lot more pressure on the public sector, I want to ask, is it correct to summarize transformational governance as the kind of governance that corporates do in their own enlightened self-interest by changing their horizon? What I mean is you stop looking at your desk. You look further than your desk, further than your corporate building, your headquarters. You start looking at what is happening in your environment and in your whole country, or even strategically in the sub-region, because of all these macro economic things that are happening. And I'm wondering if those corporates could have headed it off by calling themselves together and sitting with the government early on to show them exactly where we're going to end up at the end of the period. Is it in our enlightened, because this transformational governance sounds so exotic, but not to make it sound so far away from what we do, I think it's just a different horizon. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
We'll take one more question.
And then we can take another batch.
All right, thank you. My name is James Adenung, work with Dangote, HSC on sustainability. Now, sorry. Okay, my name is James Adenuga, Group Chief HSC on sustainability Dangote Group. So my line of thinking is around the success or understanding how corporate governance, as it were, currently is, and especially some of the pitfalls, those who have not embraced in what it is, in the true sense of what it is, corporate governance, the pitfall they suffered. And I've had to learn from that to recalibrate. Now, is there a place for that gap assessment before we then plunge into, because obviously there's definitely benefit in transformational governance from some of the examples, practical examples you actually alluded to in your presentation. So is there any way there is some way of like baton exchange kind of thing on, seeing some of the pitfalls of incorrect or ineffective, embracing of corporate governance in a sense, especially in the advent of ESG as it is currently. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think, Soji's in the room. This is one of the things the corporate governance rating system was looking to do. The corporate governance rating system was something that was developed by CBI and launched in collaboration with the Nigerian exchange, as they're called today. And companies had to do this fiduciary awareness test. The directors had to do the test. But apart from that, they had to also do a self-assessment of where they were. But then also that self-assessment had to be verified from external stakeholders. There are reports that we do today as a corporate. You have to do your SEC corporate governance reporting every year, also with the FRC, and that should show you where the gaps are. Now, things are not always as they seem, unfortunately, within this environment. Because in a highly regulated environment, in an environment where there are a lot of players, it's very easy without having a philosophy of regulation and without that transparency being there and accountability being there between both the private and public sector for regulatory capture by powerful individuals, right? And so in this environment, you can only do your best, right, as a corporate. But there are different initiatives where corporates are holding themselves accountable as peers, you know, and hopefully our society and our corporate world will evolve to that place where there are consequences. So there are incentives to behave well, but there are also sanctions, and those sanctions are evenly applied across board. So one person doesn't get off for doing the wrong thing and another person gets penalized. Because you can understand if you have 3 children and you all treat them differently, they all commit the same offense and you treat them differently, you as a parent will lack integrity. Your kids will say you're not fair. And so what we need is a system where there is fairness. All the principles we spoke about for the corporate sector, the private sector, where that's also happening within our public sector. And we can play a role. And that is why at some stage, I decided I was going to get involved, you know, and engage the chiefs, the heads of the different regulatory bodies and say, how do we improve governance? Under Ambassador Shuaibu, who was a former executive secretary, we approached him and we said, you were responsible for corporate governance in Nigeria under the FRC Act. You have a directorate of corporate governance. How can we help you to succeed? And this is a private sector, then going to the public sector. And out of that came the public sector code, which should be launched soon. It's under consultation. The not-for-profit sector code, which again is still under consultation and should be launched soon. And then, of course, these corporate governance guidelines for the SME sector. And, you know, we've also engaged with the current chief executive, Dr. Olo, and hopefully, I mean, we have a launch date of the 9th for the SME guidelines. Now, the UN Global Compact focus is on the private sector. And it's what can the private sector do to ensure that the 10 principles, which cover human rights, anti-corruption, labor and environment, and more than that, the SDG goals since 2015, how do we operationalize those? So the focus is always going to be starting from the private sector point of view. And of course, by its very nature, because this tool is about engaging with governments, and I think you may have heard me say during the video that was played, engaging with governments to ensure that we're able to together move the country forward. Government cannot do it on their own. They need the private sector. And there are certain things that are being run by government right now that should be run by the private sector. I was speaking to a young man, Chess in Slums, Tunde Onokoya, and we were talking about the fact that you do your program, you get these kids from Oshodi under a bridge to play chess, you identify bright sparks amongst them, but you don't leave them, you can't leave them under the bridge in Oshodi. You have to put them into a home. You have to take them off the streets. So how do we take them off the streets? The orphanages are saying it will change the dynamics of the orphanage because some of these kids are on hard drugs. There are not enough shelter homes. The shelter homes that are being run by, they're correctional homes, but they don't belong in a correctional home. A lot of these correctional homes should be turned over by the state to the private sector to run. Otherwise, but that's an area of transformational governance, right? And so it is for companies to come alongside Chess in Slums and say, we're going to help you fix this problem in a way that is sustainable, right? And And there's so many other examples. Companies are doing a lot. It's just we don't necessarily, if I were to ask some of the companies in this room what they're doing in the area of transformational governance, having given some examples, we're doing a lot. As individuals, we're doing a lot because we don't have a social security system. But how do we combine these efforts? And this is what transformational governance is about also. How do we combine these efforts to make sure that we're making more of an impact? I want to turn to your question, Soji. Yes, it is not looking at your navel, beyond looking at your navel, being able to look out to say, I cannot operate a business, whether I am an FMCG, in an environment where 80% of the population cannot afford to buy my products. It just doesn't make sense. So how do I ensure that we deal with these challenges? And, you know, I want to say something here. A lot of people have said, oh, all the international oil companies, IOCs are leaving Nigeria. They're not leaving Nigeria, first of all. They're going deeper offshore because they don't want to deal with your community issues. We are best placed to deal with our community issues. And we've been saying this for a while. So we called again on the Nigerian government to please approve our applications that are before them. And it's not just Owando, please. It's not an Owando thing. Seplat have been waiting. Shell are also waiting. Because once we are able to go in there and get production up, particularly in these joint ventures, then we will see some more revenue coming into the country. And I hear people say, oh, we're not qualified. We don't have the experience to run these operations. We've been running it. We've got great engineers. We've got Nigerians who are all over the world working in other countries. We will bring them back if we have to. We will run these things and we'll run them profitably because our focus and because these are our people. These communities, a lot of the people who work with our companies belong to these communities. They're from these communities. So we're best placed to deal with these things. Yes.
I will just say we pause here. I know that we are boiling with questions. We actually have a discussion session. Yes, right after this. Just after this. So I would want to very quickly bring on board Ms. Uto Opana, co-lead of the Anti-Corruption Working Group and Company Secretary, MTN Nigeria PLC.
Morning, everyone, and thank you for attending. I know that everyone is bursting with comments because we didn't invite you here to sit down and listen. We also invited you to engage, interact, share your thoughts, share your experiences, the good, the bad, what we can do better, and just bring your thoughts to the table. So welcome once again. I'm so delighted to see that the room is full. I'm sure they can see the real Luto. So I know we live in a virtual world and I'm all about virtual. But the real, I guess those online will want to see if they can't see me. So welcome, and please let's give another round of applause to Ayo. You can feel the fire, the passion that she exudes when she speaks, because when you're immersed in a subject and you're closely connected to it, that's what comes forth. So Ayo, thank you very much for the work that you have done, and Owando, and also to Mr. Soji Apampa, who likes to be the quiet person in the room. He does a lot of the heavy lifting. When he asked the question, I said, well, he's asking a question that he should be responding to. And I was happy to see that he landed, also opened the door to the response. Because oftentimes it's interesting to just ask yourself whether as businesses, why are we doing what we're doing? The why needs to be asked often and often. And when the questions were being asked, it just triggered thoughts in my mind that, why are we here? And if we think back to a popular proverb that we're all very familiar with, if you want to go far, how do you go? You go together. And that's why we're here. We're here to go together on this journey to transformational governance. When corporate governance emerged as a buzzword over a decade ago, everyone in the room, whenever they speak, they will talk about corporate governance. And now we're changing to the next phase of that, which is transformational governance, and which is not just focusing on what is legal, but not doing what is right. And what is right by our communities, what is right by our various stakeholder groups. And so in this session, Ayo has explained that the UN Global Compact focuses on how businesses, how the private sector can drive a lot of these issues. And so with all the people in the room, this is the time where your voice, we want to hear from you. On the UN Global Compact side, you've heard a lot from the presentations, from Ayo speaking, but now it's time to hear from you. Over the course of 2023, so many developments. In fact, 2020, the decade started with a crisis. And in that crisis, opportunities also emerged. I'm not sure any of us thought about that from March 2020 or thereabouts, we would all be huddling in our various homes, not even on the streets. If you recall, for at least 2 weeks, Lagos was under lockdown and the whole of Nigeria. And thoughts emerged as to how to keep things going. How would people feed? How would the most vulnerable amongst us be catered for? And as a collective, we came up with solutions, whether from the private business side, whether from the government. I read somewhere that NCDC is regarded as the best in terms of disease management across the globe. Who would have thought about that? Whether it was managing Ebola, whether it was handling the coronavirus crisis, I'm sure the developed world thought that in Nigeria we'll be dying like flies on the streets. But we didn't. We survived and we actually did better than the West. We don't know whether it's the sun, we don't know whether it's the ginger and whatever else people drank or bathed with. We don't know. But that just shows resilience. And businesses came to the table. Whatever you provided, I recall we realized that our services became essential. People needed to stay connected. People needed to get information. People needed to know that their loved ones were okay. People needed to know what to do in the event that they actually caught the virus. And so various businesses, particularly in ICT, became essential. I recall that those of us in the sector, at that point, we were thinking about how to roll out digital services. We did not know the uptake would go beyond anybody's imagination because it now became an essential service. And you had to make sure that those who could not afford that service were able to utilize it. So things like free SMSs that were provided so that people could stay connected, and so on and so on. Your various organizations around this room contributed in so many ways to making that happen. So this decade started with a crisis that we all leveraged and looked at these challenges in the face and converted them to opportunities. And so right now, it is to hear your experience. What are your thoughts? What are the challenges? There's so many of us in this room who can respond to your comments or who can, because like I said, we didn't bring you here just to listen to this side, but we want to take your thoughts. What are your concerns about implementation? I didn't see the number of hands in the room. How many of you have tried to log in and do an assessment using the Transformational Governance Toolkit? Anyone? No one. Okay, so Ayo, you're excluded. Those of us on this side, we're completely, we don't count. Now is the time. for those that who are really, we want to feel the pulse in the room. So your thoughts, your experiences in your organizations, or just how do you see the future? What are your thoughts for the future? And please feel very, very free to raise your hand. The thing about being in a public place is you don't want to be the first to raise your hand. But once the first person raises a hand, and perhaps they told me we need to give a prize to the first person. Oh, we already have a winner here. And please, let's give her a loud applause to encourage her.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hilda Nko. I'm the principal at HNC Professional Services. So I'm a governance practitioner, and in the course of my work, I've dealt with a lot of companies doing different things for boards and management. I'm hearing in the discussions this morning, I'm hearing corporate governance, I'm hearing ESG, I'm hearing transformational governance, I'm hearing CSR without really mentioning CSR. And I find that a lot of companies are even still struggling with the regular CSR, and we know it. And transformational governance is telling me now, look away from just internal and then begin to explore your society, your environment, and all of that. My question is this now. For those of us who do a lot of trainings, I expect that we're expected to incorporate some level of transformational governance in our curriculum as we interact with directors and as we interact with executive management of companies. How do we then marry budgetary issues or budgetary concerns with the demands of transformational governance? Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And I know the experts are in the room. Not just questions, but let's all hear what are the opportunities that you see? What are the challenges that you see? Because this is about actually looking into the future. And the future is very fast these days. The future, March 2023, may completely change by June. Things, if you are really connected to what's going on in the rest of the world, you'll find that in 6 months, a lot of things are obsolete and you have to relearn. So you have to get into the mode of unlearning a lot of the things you know, relearning, and then in another 3 months, you go through the cycle again. So we'll note that comment down. What's that dilemma? How do you deal with it in terms of particularly around budget? Okay, so we have a hand up there, and then the lady, you see the hands are coming now, and we'll take it in that order.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ugo. I'm head of programs at Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation. So I heard her talking about being able to marry budgetary issues and sustainability. Our work across Africa is basically supporting nonprofits, providing grants and building their capacity. Annual convening last year was around ESGs, and we had very few participation. And even those that came in found it hard to follow. Now, my question is, most of the engagement of the UN Global Compact and every other person who's trying to work around ESG or governance per se is trying to say we're trying to fix public sector, we're trying to fix private sector, we're trying to fix the NGOs. Now, people need capacity to be able to do these things, right? It's like coming to my postgraduate class to bring new things for me to do when I haven't been taught. So my question is, where's the education starting from, right? Is there a conscious effort to engage people who are living accounting schools, business schools, undergraduates to start understanding these things from the beginning, so that when you come up with toolkits like this, it doesn't look like teaching a 55-year-old how to use a computer for the first time, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, if you've done that, you understand it's crazy. So what is the intentional effort, like into curriculums, like into the professional bodies? Are this like part of requirements for people to qualify most of the Nigerian Institute of Management and all the other CIBN and co? Is this part of what people have to learn, so that when they get to these leadership positions, when they have to make all these decisions, it is not like somebody is trying to talk about something new and so on? Thank you.
Thank you. Tumi, before you move on, I'm going to be a Nigerian right now, and I'm going to answer your question by asking you a question. Yes. Sorry? I am a Nigerian. Proudly. I will always proudly be a Nigerian. Well, whatever, I am a Nigerian. I can't change that fact. So in whatever context, okay, let's aim for the good. Let's think positively. But I'm proudly Nigerian. And so what are your thoughts? Because we're actually here to hear your thoughts and take it back and use it to move forward. What are your thoughts? Where do you think the education should start from? Because your experience, you've had engagements with different stakeholder groups. Where do you think it would be most impactful?
No, for me, I do think so. The question I asked is more around a rechanneling of focus, right? To say it is not enough to bring out policies, to mete out punishments to people who have made mistakes as private sector or as government, but it's important for you to look at the social part of it, to start saying, how many people have we equipped to be able to get to that point? So when your consultations start or when your engagements begin, instead of trying to say what is public sector doing or what is private sector doing, you should probably say, how can we educate more people to actually even understand what this whole governance or the social part of it or the environment, what it actually means, right? So because rightly, like you said, from our point of view, what we're doing with the nonprofits is to say that you can actually be more sustainable. People can give you more money. You can retain more of your staff if you do some of these things. But what we also realize is that people we're asking to do these things don't even understand what they mean. So my suggestion then will be to say, do you have probably a working group that their job is to galvanize all the points of education, especially the professional bodies where people are being certified to become one certified person or the other, to say, encourage them, or I mean, with your influence, make sure that there is a unit in the things that certify them, that make sure they understand this part of governance. That's what my suggestion would be.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And a very, very, very good suggestion. And I've noted that thankfully in the room, I can see the registrar of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, who actually, you can stand up for recognition. So those are the points of engagement. And truly, we are going to rigorously, as you have suggested, engage them, because if you don't understand, then you don't know what to do. I'm sure some of us at one point or the other have been to these workshops where you hear lots said, but you don't actually know how to go back and implement them, or you can't unbundle them in your mind and make it real and practical for you. And so no matter how, as you have rightly pointed out, you roll out these toolkits. If you don't understand, or if it's not practical or real, if there's really nothing you can do with it, it's another toolkit, it's another framework. And we're going to work along with everyone in this room, which is why we invited you, to make sure that these sort of issues are extracted and we find real and practical ways to actually make sure that they are useful for the target audience, and that we make that impact that we so desire. The lady here had her hand up. Yes. Yes, so there's another lady at the back who had her, yes, the lady in black there. Later, and at the back, please raise your hand so I can see. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All the ladies today.
Well, it was men first, so it's our turn. So my name is Bolanle Odiale. I'm the founder for CreditWise Financials. So I consider myself a small business, and I deal with small businesses, women, you know, basically poverty alleviation and gender equality. And I find this really interesting because, and I've been thinking about it, I try to live, you know, I try to walk the talk in my office, in my business, my clients, my stakeholders. And so I try to pay my taxes. I make sure there's no corruption in my business. I try to be fair to my staff and my stakeholders. But I find that there are other counterparties that I deal with that are not, it's not as easy. Like, for example, I try to get my license every year. And my consultant goes, Bola, you are the only one that will give me all these taxes. How do you pay so much? But you don't really need to pay this much. Just give me like receipt of 100,000 naira because, you know, a year, because it's a lot easier for me to get your license out than when you give me all these documents and then the state government, they are confused, you know, they ask for more and, you know, and so I'm not encouraged, you know, by doing that. And then because I'm a small business, my level of influence on the public sector is a lot less than, I'm not an MTN, for instance, I'm not a Unilever, I'm not an Ando, so I can say I'm influencing the public sector, you know, I have that influence. So how do we encourage, or how do we really, and to the EcoBank, my EcoBank colleague's point, I don't believe that the private sector can do this in isolation. There has to be that advocacy with the public sector, the public servants. It's important. I was trying to get a SCIML certificate. For 2 years, I refused to pay them that because it's free. I kept going. I kept writing my emails. They didn't give me. Then I knew somebody. So I remember that I had a friend. I won't name the institution. Everybody knows the institution that issues. And I said, okay, I've been trying to get this SCIML for the past. He said, how much did you offer? I said, nothing. Now it's free. You're not ready. That was the response. You're not ready. You're not ready. It's 100,000. Oh, it's normally 150, but you know, I can help you do it for 100,000. Do you know that he insisted because I needed to give this certificate? I was under extreme pressure. Do you know I got that thing in 24 hours? 24 hours after, okay, I had to pay 100. I said, okay, I'll pay 100, and I got it. So how do we? So obviously that goes my anti-corruption, you know, thinking out of the window, right? So how do we deal with this matter? It's a painful part of my life. You know, I think about it every day. I'm trying to do the right thing, but there's always something out there that wants to just kill me, you know, and we need to progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. The reason why I was chuckling is I wish we had a crystal ball to look and see the response to that. But it's constant engagement, constant engagement. Mr. Soji Apaba has been in the trenches for, I tell you, for so long that if he were to sit down with you and tell you, because he's actually been quite an advocate in that space. CBI and all of us who are members of CBI, it's a constant engagement. And because the SME sector is really under pressure, just like the big corporations are also under pressure. While one would look and say the big corporations have a lot more muscle, it's almost like your problem is bigger, because the expectation, when you think of the tall poppy syndrome, for instance, the Dangotes will understand, and all the other big corporations Owandos, but we also do it because we know that there's a whole ecosystem that depends on that. I know recently NECA has written about the expatriate levy issue. And so across different channels, sometimes a lot of these efforts are not visible, but there's a lot of engagement going on. Even government itself wants this country to work. Because if the private sector collapses, that's it. Who will pay your taxes? So there's a lot that depends on both sides coming together. And, you know, these are stories that we really need to eliminate. We really need to eliminate these stories so that the small business can survive. As they say, let the small business breathe. Let the big business breathe. So across both, it is a mutual, for a mutual benefit that this country must work. And that's what transformational governance is about, looking beyond. I will appeal to everyone to please make their comments as brief as possible. We're taking down notes, and we will continue to engage. Tommy is in the room, so please make your comments brief so we can wrap up, because as practitioners, we're also aware that coming out on a Tuesday and spending your morning, you also want to go back to your day job. I can see the heads nodding, so I take it that everyone will make it brief. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Familiarised Shomi. I'm an associate with Aluko Ibode. It's a law firm. And primarily, I'm in the Governance, Risk and Compliance Department, and we advise clients on sustainability, ESG, incorporating all of these standards into their businesses. We also do corporate governance audits and all of that. And the two issues that I've identified in coming into the practice, trying to develop myself, build capacity, one of the key things is that there's like a sea of information. There's so much. There's this organization putting this out. There's that organization that has this standard. There's this rating. There's that rating. There's just a lot. And I think we can do better, especially for us in Nigeria, if we can come together and say, okay, for businesses, for this level, this is what we should be looking at. This is where we can start from. And then this is how we can now navigate and grow. Because when there's just so much information, there's this toolkit, there's that, you're wondering where exactly to start from. And we've already said that this is beyond just what the regulators have prescribed. This is principle-based. So what can we do to state, okay, this is sort of like a path that we're following, so companies can toe in that line. And the other thing, so it's about working cohesively for us that on the advisory side and looking to build capacity continuously.
Thank you very much for the comments. I believe a lot of that is beginning to become visible. When we look at the harmonization of what is now the NCCG, when we look at even the fact that sector regulators have agreed with essentially working with the FRC to make sure that we don't have duplicity of codes, but now we have guidelines across sectors. We've seen that in financial services. We've seen that in the telecoms and all other sectors. So there's beginning to be that convergence of thoughts and ideals, as you've pointed out. And we're constantly going there. We also saw the Business Facilitation Act last year come out and try and close a lot of the existing gaps in in KAMA 2020. So having all the key players in the room is always important, which is why having a voice when this toolkit was being developed in the Think Lab was also very important, so that all these issues, because implementation becomes difficult when you have a multiplicity of things to converge. We've seen how the FRC has championed the implementation readiness for IFRS 1 and 2. And that's part of the collective engagements to make sure that there's harmonization, one thought, one goal, and we all work together to make it happen. How many hands do we still have up? One?
This will be our last comment question,
Okay,
and
okay.
then yes. Every other
Please,
comment.
okay, there's one more there. Let's just accommodate that.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any hands online? I can't see.
Any questions, comments online?
Okay.
Okay, so right after this person, I'll take the question and comments online, then the last person, and then we'll go with the discussion session.
Excellent. Please, any comments you might have, please, Tumi will share an email. You can send them to the UN Global Compact Nigeria Network, and we will be more than happy to respond and share our thoughts with you. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Folashade Akimishere. First of all, I'm a partner with Adroit and Deft, a consulting firm. I'm also the chairperson for the Young Directors Forum, Chartered Institute of Directors. For me, the forerunner is the role of directors. I feel that it's important to create additional awareness for directors to understand the increasing role and responsibilities that they carry. Speaking to some of the issues with respect to training, capacity, and budgeting for same, if the board understands that they have a greater responsibility other than to say, okay, I have an oversight function over what management does. I create some kind of policies, and they look deeper into what my role is with some of the burning issues in society and how they can actually make an impact. I think that it will make a lot of difference. So for me, I think it's important for professional organizations to focus on building the capacity of their members, not just as directors. I also want to speak to chartered secretaries who are responsible for setting the agenda for board meetings, So it's important for that chartered secretary to be well aware of what is the forerunner, what is going on in CSR, what is going on with respect to diversity, talent, building, retention policy, some of the issues that a lot of organizations are facing now, and then bring it to the board so they know that I have a whole lot that resting on my shoulders. So how do I build my competencies? So for me, I think boards as a whole, like Ms. Jagan said, it's important to start and set the tone from the top. So the board actually does drive what happens in the private sector as well as the public sector, which takes me to my third point. There needs to be an increasing collaboration between boards in the public sector, private sector, and of course, professional organizations to see how we can keep hammering on the need for capacity building and budgeting for same so we can make, the necessary changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those well-articulated thoughts. I believe that the Chartered Institute of Directors is also a key stakeholder because this is a platform where directors, whether irrespective of the sector, they gather. If you recall, during Michelle's presentation, there was actually a toolkit for directors. And I urge all in the room, particularly chartered secretaries, to bring this to the attention of their board members. Board development is so critical. It is not just nice to go for training. It is important. Let's not assume that the residual knowledge that the director brought on the day of appointment is still relevant and useful. Our board members must be conscious of trends and what they need to do to ensure that they make sure that the company is a going concern at all times. Please go ahead. Next.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mercia Dukugu Amina. I'm with Fiduciary Services Limited. We are a fiduciary and private client focused firm. I'm a chartered secretary, so nice to have you here, sir. I was going to talk about I was going to take like a follow on for when he raised the issue on education, but when she mentioned the school issue, I said, okay, let me also, I'm a Nigerian and I'm so proud to be a Nigerian. I mean, this is our land. We have to make it work. I got my school without issues. And I've gotten for clients without issues because we operate within that governance and corporate administration space. So I really don't understand what the issues are. Maybe it's the hardship that we are all coming in, but I can tell you without any issues that I didn't pay a dime for when we had to get asked or when we had to get for other persons. So at times when we have the negative, let's also be able to be confident enough to talk about the fact that there are still some good eggs within the public sector. And for me and my clients, we haven't had that extortion or whatever issues with SCOMOL. Okay, that said, I want to kind of, like I said, reiterate, there's the need, I know that the NSC, sorry, it's no longer NSC, it's NGX, yes, Nigerian Exchange Board. I know they have like a governance index, and I know that SEC also has its own, and I know that both entities, I mean, like if you're looking at, we're talking about those that would, I mean, like create that visibility and be able to champion it in a way that it takes a whole lot of people along on that journey. So I think that there's a need for the toolkit to become hands-on toolkits that those regulators are able to share with their members or their participants. So I think that the NSC and the SEC team should actually be the ones that will say, okay, even if you have the code, or even the FRC, even if you have the code, there are accompanying toolkits that have been developed that would further help you in either your assessment, evaluation, or even the utility of the governance code that we have already provided. So I think that the UN Nations Global Compact should do a lot more with the partnerships that would be able to make sure that this transformational toolkit does become something that we don't talk about, but really we live it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. And just to point out that for like this, opportunities to network. I always say, don't leave a place without meeting 2 new people. If you can't meet 2, at least meet 1. So make new friends. There are people who have shared their positive experience dealing with the system. And please make sure you interact, because in this, we're in it together. Are there questions or comments online? Tumi, do you want to read them? Do we have any?
We have questions, but they've been answered during the course of engagements. Okay. We would want to appreciate you for your time today. Very quickly, just to also mention, in terms of engagements, just about a week or 2 weeks ago, we had a sustainability training for the public sector focused on MDAs. We had some MDAs that did not respond, but we also had MDAs that engaged extensively, and we're asking for a follow-up. So we are doing the work. We'll also seek for your collaboration. Also engage with the UN Global Compact, because there are a lot more resources that you can benefit from at different tiers of your journey when it comes to sustainability, be a micro organization, an SME, or even a large company as well. I would very quickly just want to draw this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your time. Please, when we do call on you again, please respond to us. And we will keep on moving the world forward on sustainability and transformational governance. Thank you very much, as Ms. Jagun gives the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. To be honest, I really wanted to give Mr. Pampa an opportunity to speak to some of the questions that were raised, particularly regarding a toolkit for the SME sector. I wanted to also, in terms of the ease of doing business, you see, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of training that ICSAN have done on ESG. There's a lot of training that the IOD has done. In fact, I have a training I'm delivering for the IOD tomorrow to directors on ESG reporting. There's a lot out there, but if you don't engage, you really don't get to know about these things. I would also say if you had looked at the toolkit or done, you can scan the, if you go through the toolkit, it's very practical. And so it will answer a lot of the other questions that have been raised. I would also, we'll respond to some of the other questions at a later time, but I do want to get Mr. Pampa to speak about the toolkit, finally.
Well, good morning once again. Very quickly, just to let you know, we've developed in partnership with the UN Global Compact, a business governance guideline. We didn't call it corporate governance. And it's not compulsory. There are guidelines, but you will get a lot of help. When it's launched, it will be launched also with a resource where if you want to know how to apply for SCUMO, you will get a form there. If you want to go beyond those templates and practical guides, and you want a professional that can help you get it done without resorting to corruption, and what is free, and what you need to pay, you don't want to pay more than what is going on, those people will also be available online for you to be able to access them and book their services as well. So this is coming in April, early April, April 9, and hopefully we'll be able to invite the people in this room as well. But it's a very common problem that we all face. Thank you.
So thank you very much again, everyone, for coming as Tumi has closed. And those online, thank you for your patience. Thank you for waiting, through the discussions. And yeah, we look forward to collaborating much more with you. Like Tumi said, there's actually an SME accelerator. There's an SME toolkit on the UNGC website, and there is also an accelerator. There are various accelerators going on at the moment. The climate change accelerator is about to start soon for members. There's a human rights accelerator that is ongoing right now. There is so much available with the UNGC, so please make inquiries with Tumi afterwards. Thank you. So please don't rush off. Let's network. And the refreshments outside.
The refreshments just outside. Thank you very much for your time.
National change through collaboration as well with other companies, but also more importantly with government and with the not-for-profit sector.
And how easily will companies be able to access this toolkit?
It's freely available on the United Nations Global Compact website, or if you go to the link to the invitation, today's invitation, or you go on the local network, United Nations Global Compact Nigeria's network, website or Instagram handles, social media handles, you'll be able to see the link to be able to access the tool, and it's freely available. Also available will be the guides that have been spoken about, that kind of like explain a bit more about what transformational governance is about and how it can actually change you as a company and change your, I guess, your decision making and your leadership as a company operating within your industry.
And how relevant is it?
Extremely relevant, and I think for me it was very important that I was involved in the toolkit. I mean, you saw the video. It was important to represent Africa and to also represent a developing country perspective to make sure that, the challenges we were imposing upon ourselves as well as the opportunities are reflective of our environment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
discussion?
To let our stakeholder communities, through the participants, know that the traditional governance as we know it has moved on. Transformational governance talks about going above and beyond your legal, your regulatory requirements to actually see what's the right thing to do. Because when we do the right thing as the private sector, we will ensure sustainable businesses. There also, from the questions in the room, there's smaller players who actually also depend on bigger players to coexist and to engage, whether on a level that they themselves cannot. And so it's about continuous collective action. It's about, as I mentioned, not just focusing on what is legal, but what is the right thing to do. So for us, that's the biggest lesson that we want people to remember about this engagement.
And how relevant is it?
It's very relevant because businesses need to exist, particularly now. We're still in very uncertain times across the globe and also in our country. Doing business is getting increasingly difficult. But there's still opportunities, and we want to see where are those challenges and where are those opportunities. And that's what transformational governance helps you to do. To focus your thoughts not just on the challenges, but to say, how can we continue to do business, continue to help to transform our various ecosystems, and to make sure that the points where government and businesses meet, and also in accordance to the various UN frameworks and guiding principles.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Enjoy the rest of your
You too. I think that's it.
Okay. Good afternoon, sir.
Good
We've
afternoon.
just launched a toolkit for transformational change. How relevant and important is this to companies?
It is very important to companies to think of transformational governance because we need to change our perspective. It's one thing to look at your board and get stuck just thinking at the level of your boards. It's another thing to think at the level of your shareholders and stakeholders, immediate. But when things buffet you from the business environment, you suddenly realize that perhaps your horizon wasn't wide enough. And when strategic things in the geopolitics of the country in which you're operating, for example, what is happening in the Sahel and how it affects some of the FMCG companies, because people come to Nigeria and take those goods as far as Mali, Niger, and so on. What does that do to your sales? So if you don't think that broadly and about getting involved in your own best interest, to lend a hand in the governance of the environment, then you become a victim of that environment. And even as an SME, if you don't join in collective action with others to also manage the impact of your regulator on yourself, you then become a victim. So these are high-risk areas that it's in our interest to manage. Transformational Governance Toolkit just gives you a set of tools that you can use and prompts that you can use to manage that process internally and externally.
And
Thank
how
you.
does it impact businesses? Last question.
Oh, this is survival stuff that we're talking about, because if you're unable to manage the risks around you and some of those risks materialize, they damage you. So it is that crucial to your business.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.